A founder asks, should we do an LLC or C-Corp in 2026? But what they really mean is, will investors take us seriously? Will my taxes get complicated? Will I regret this in 18 months? Because this isn't a wife's decision, it's about fundraising, equity, and taxes. And the right answer depends on your roadmap, not your preference. Today, we break it down the way founders actually need it. What the IRS and state law really say, why VCs default to Delaware C-Corporation, and when an LLC is a smarter start, and what the switching later looks like when it's done right.
Here's the first mental unlock. LLC and C-Corp are actually two separate systems that people often mash together. One system is state law, the exact legal wrapper you form, while the other one is federal taxation. That's the way how the Internal Revenue Service treats you. And this is where founders get tripped up. An LLC doesn't automatically mean pass-through forever. Under IRS rules, an LLC can be taxed as a partnership or disregarded entity by default, but it can also elect to be taxed as a corporation by filing Form 8832. So if someone tells you that limited company equals pass-through, while C-Corp equals corporate tax, they're simplifying rough. The structure is legal, the tax treatment can be chosen. But there's another point that matters. Even if an LLC elects corporate taxation, that still doesn't automatically make it behave like the investor-ready equity vehicle VCs are used to. When investors push you toward Delaware C-Corp, they're usually not having a philosophical moment. They're buying speed, standardization, and enforceable rights that fit a proven template. Most venture rounds are designed around preferred stock mechanics, such as liquidation preference, protective provisions, board rights, conversion terms, and a set of governance controls that everyone in the room already knows how to read. The MVCEI model documents, which are a major industry baseline, are built for that corporate stock framework. Delaware corporate law also explicitly supports multiple classes and series of stock with preferences spelled out in the charter, which is exactly what preferred rounds rely on. That's the core. For institutional VC, the default deal language is a corporation issuing preferred stock, and Delaware is the most commonly accepted jurisdiction. So startup can simply raise money as a limited liability, especially with strategics or certain niche funds that are comfortable with this LLC-specific economics. But classic VC often avoids LLCs because they introduce friction exactly where venture money hates it, in equity instruments, cap table clarity, tax flows, and exit readiness. Corporations are designed around stock plans and approvals, as well as the mechanics that make options and future rounds feel like routine. Limited companies, even when perfectly legal and workable, can drift into unit structures, profit interests, special allocations, and member rights that make the documentation heavier and the diligence process slower. And in venture, slower isn't just annoying, it can be deal-killing. Let's talk taxes without mythology. A C-Corp pays corporate income tax at the corporate level. The corporate rate in the Internal Revenue Code is 21%, if profits are later distributed to shareholders. There can be an additional layer of tax at the shareholder level. That's the classic double taxation idea founders hear about. An LLC, by default, is usually treated as a pass-through for federal tax purposes, either as a disregarded entity or as a partnership. But again, the tax government allows limited companies to elect corporate tax treatment via Form 8832. So the real founder takeaway is, taxes are one dimension, but if you're building a venture-scale company, structure decisions are usually driven by fundraising mechanics and predictable governance, but not by optimizing this year's tax bill. A lot of founders then say, okay, what about an S-Corp? And here is another important nuance. S-Corp is not a separate legal entity. It's a tax election. The government treats it differently if you qualify and file accordingly. But S-Corp comes with eligibility rules and structural limitations that often clash with venture financing, especially when you need flexible stock classes and venture standard preferred terms. That's why most VC-bound startups don't build their long-term plan around being an S-Corp.
Here is how to decide in real life. If you plan to raise VC in the next 6 to 18 months, not maybe someday, but actually moving in that direction, the default answer is Delaware C-Corporation. If you're bootstrapped and focused on cash flow or building something where VC is unlikely, an LLC can be a good start. Not because it sounds founder-friendly, but because you may not need preferred stock and venture governance on day one. And if you're a non-US founder unsure about US funding, pick a structure that works for you now, but design it so a Delaware parent company can be added later without any pain. The mistake isn't the starting point. The mistake is building in a way that makes a future change painful.
Founders love the idea. Start as an LLC now, convert later when investors show up. Sometimes that works, but the conversion becomes hard when early decisions are sloppy, like IP sitting with a founder personally, unclear founder vesting logic, early safe or note terms that don't map cleanly, or an equity plan that was improvised. So yes, switching later is possible, but if you think you might do it, you should architect for it from day one. In practice, that means keeping the cap table clean, documenting IP assignments early, and not getting creative with member economics unless you're sure you'll stay an LLC long term. Most founders don't actually need such formalities as an LLC and C-Corp. First of all, they need outcomes. They need an equity structure that matches how they'll hire and incentivize people. They need a cap table that won't collapse during diligence. They need tax and compliance predictability. And they need an exit pathway that doesn't require rebuilding the company's legal shell right before the biggest moment. If your roadmap includes institutional capital, employee equity at scale, and venture standard rounds, you're almost always solving those outcomes with a C-Corp framework.
At Icon.Partners, we don't sell Delaware for everyone. We build structures that match your funding path. Structures that don't break when real investors look under the hood. Tell us where founders live, where customers are, whether VC is actually planned. What equity setup you need? We will map the cleanest legal and tax path for you. Whether that's starting as an LLC, going straight to Delaware C-Corp, or planning a clean flip later. If you want a structure map for your specific case, the contact form is in the description. Thank you for staying here and have a good one.